Fernando Mendoza just got $57 million, but how he's choosing to live with that money is insane. While other NFL stars might be buying mansions and supercars, Mendoza is doing almost the complete opposite. Let's get into it. The Las Vegas Raiders signed their new quarterback to a 4-year contract worth $57.27 million, and every dollar of it is fully guaranteed. The Las Vegas Raiders signed #1 overall draft pick quarterback Fernando Mendoza to a 4-year deal worth $57.27 million on July 23, 2026. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport was the one who broke the structure of it and reported it's a 4-year deal worth a fully guaranteed $57.27 million with a 5th-year option like every first-round pick gets. Mendoza wasn't in a rush to make it official either. He was actually the last of the Raiders' 10-player draft class this year to sign his contract, in part due to ongoing negotiations over the timing of his signing bonus. That wasn't a money dispute over the total. The number was already locked in by league rules. It was about how the cash would land. The standard 4-year arrangement features a $38.1 million signing bonus, and reports say negotiations were prolonged due to discussions regarding the structure and timing of the bonus payment, with Mendoza's representation advocating for the sum to be paid in a single installment. Here's the part that made this deal even bigger than anyone expected on draft night. Mendoza's total contract value ended up nearly $3 million higher than the initial projection going into the NFL draft. Because right after the draft, the league finalized the rookie wage scale, and the overall boosts were related to the establishment of the record $301.2 million salary cap for the 2026 season. In other words, the whole league got richer, and Mendoza's rookie deal rode that wave straight to $57 million. When it finally got done, he didn't put out some polished statement written by an agency. He posted a quick video. "What's up, guys? Fernando Mendoza. I'm excited to get this thing signed. Excited to be a part of the silver and black. Can't wait. Appreciate you guys all support. Let's get this thing rolling." Now, put this in context of where the Raiders were as a franchise before this. This wasn't a team picking a quarterback for fun at the top of the draft. The Raiders used the franchise's second #1 overall pick in the common draft era to pick Mendoza, having selected LSU quarterback Jamarcus Russell #1 overall back in 2007. That name alone tells you what was riding on this pick working out. Russell became the cautionary tale of the entire league. A bust who burned through a massive rookie deal and vanished from football within a few years. Mendoza is the first player the franchise has bet everything on at that slot since, and the resume backing up the money isn't thin. Mendoza is just the 3rd quarterback in the Super Bowl era to win the Heisman and a national title. Prior to being taken #1 overall in the ensuing NFL draft, following Cam Newton in 2011 and Joe Burrow in 2020. Those are the only 2 names in the same sentence as his before this deal got signed. One of them won a Super Bowl, the other became an MVP. That's the company the Raiders think they just bought into. The numbers behind the run that got him here are almost absurd for a college quarterback. In 2025, Mendoza led Indiana to its first national championship with an undefeated 16-0 record, starting all 16 games and completing 273 of 379 passes for 3,535 yards, 41 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Across his whole college career, the 6'5", 225-pound Mendoza spent his final college season at Indiana after 3 years at California, appearing in 36 career games with 35 starts, completing 691 of 1,008 passes for 8,247 yards, 71 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. Here's what's strange about a deal this size, though. It didn't come with a promise of playing time. He will be competing with veterans Kirk Cousins and Aidan O'Connell for the starting job, with Las Vegas signing Cousins in the offseason, with the expectation that he could be the starter to begin the year, allowing the team to be patient with Mendoza's development. Cousins isn't cheap depth either. He came in on a free agent contract worth $20 million guaranteed, entering camp as the #1 quarterback. So Mendoza is sitting on $57 million, and he might not throw a regular season pass for months. That combination, life-changing money, zero guarantee of the spotlight, is exactly the kind of situation that has derailed rookies before. It's also exactly the situation that makes what happens next in his life so unusual. Because most 22-year-olds who just banked tens of millions of dollars in a city built entirely around spending it fast would have a very predictable next chapter. Mendoza's chapter went a completely different direction. This is where the story gets interesting, because Mendoza didn't just avoid trouble in Las Vegas. He named the exact thing he's avoiding out loud on the record. He sat down with Michael Silver of The Athletic during a lunch break at the Raiders facility, and when the conversation turned to the city he now calls home, he didn't hedge. "I've been there once or twice, but I haven't really experienced the Strip," Mendoza said. "It's like a boogeyman. A lot of people talk about the Strip like you don't want to go there. It's like when you're a kid, you're trick-or-treating and there's the haunted house." He finished the thought plainly. He wasn't so much worried about deviating from his plan. Think about what that means. Logistically, Mendoza has been living in the Las Vegas area since the Raiders took him with the #1 pick, and he's made a point to avoid the Strip. His games at Allegiant Stadium will be the closest he intends to come to Vegas's tourism hub. He is, by his own description, physically closer to some of the most famous casinos on Earth than most tourists ever get, and he's treating it like it doesn't exist. He didn't stop at one metaphor either. When pressed on why a city built for entertainment gets the cold shoulder from him specifically, he laid out the calculation. In Vegas, there is a lot to do, and sometimes it can be seen as activities that wouldn't be supporting a healthy football lifestyle. But there are different things that you can go see and do that aren't degenerative activities per se. There are some great restaurants, but I'm probably not going to be playing blackjack till late at night. That's not a guy pretending to be disciplined for a camera. That's someone drawing a hard line between the city he lives in and the city tourists fly in for. He's found the version of Vegas that has restaurants and quiet nights, and he's ignoring the version that has neon and 4 a.m. table games entirely. Silver, the reporter who got the interview, put his finger on why this matters so much for someone in Mendoza's exact position. Mendoza's trepidation isn't so much that he'll be taunted by temptation, Silver wrote. What he's really afraid of is making an unforced error by deviating from what got him here, an ultra-disciplined ethos that helped him rise from relative obscurity to become minority owner Tom Brady's sanctioned choice to uplift a struggling franchise. That last detail is worth sitting with. Tom Brady, a minority owner of the Raiders now, is tied to this pick. The pressure isn't just don't embarrass yourself as a rookie. It's don't embarrass yourself in front of the greatest quarterback who ever played, who now signs off on personnel decisions for your team. That's the kind of scrutiny that would push plenty of 22-year-olds toward letting off steam. Mendoza went the other way. It shows up in the smaller details of how he actually operates day to day. He talked about the climate shift from Miami and Bloomington to the desert, telling people during camp that it's very dry over there, being a Miami native. That's about as far as his public complaining about his new city has gone. The weather, not the wealth, not the pressure, not the pace, even the football people around him have noticed the same pattern away from the cameras. General manager John Spytek, who's watched him up close since before the draft, described the way he attacks every single day at the facility. He's just so hungry for anything football that anybody he's around that he can draw something from or learn something from that person. He's into it, Spytek said. That's a front office executive describing a guy with $57 million guaranteed. The same way you describe an undrafted free agent trying to make a roster. And he's not doing any of this to fast-track himself past a veteran either. The system that got me here, it's a grinder system, Mendoza said, and he's kept that same framing even while backing up a two-time Pro Bowl quarterback, with nothing guaranteed about when his own shot arrives. Kirk Cousins is expected to open the season as the starter, with head coach Clint Kubiak preferring a veteran presence, while Mendoza settles in behind the scenes. So picture the actual daily reality here. A 22-year-old with a fully guaranteed 9-figure adjacent contract, living a few miles from one of the most famous entertainment districts on the planet, spends his time at the practice facility, eats at a short list of restaurants he's decided are safe, and treats blackjack tables like they're contagious. That's not the rookie story anyone expected out of a #1 pick who just got paid. But if you go back and look at how he got to this contract in the first place, none of it should actually surprise you, because this is exactly how he operated. The entire time money started flowing toward him in college too. Before the $57 million, before the Raiders, before any of it, Mendoza was a quarterback nobody outside of recruiting circles was fighting over. A Miami native, Mendoza attended Christopher Columbus High School, completing 224 of 332 passes for 2,222 yards and 29 touchdowns. Solid numbers, not the kind that get 5-star rankings and 100 scholarship offers. He landed at California, and it took him a minute to even become the starter. At California from 2022 to 2024, Mendoza played 20 games with 19 starts. His first real season on the field came as a redshirt freshman, where he received honorable mention for Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year, with 1,708 passing yards and 14 touchdowns. Respectable, not spectacular. The following year, he took a real step forward, and in 2024, he threw for 3,004 yards and 16 touchdowns against 6 interceptions, earning ACC Quarterback of the Week honors 3 times. That's 3 years grinding at a program that wasn't winning big and wasn't putting him on national TV every week. Then came the decision that changed everything: the transfer portal. He described the process himself on the Pat McAfee show, comparing the modern portal to something almost frantic. Indiana and Coach Cignetti really sold me on becoming the best Fernando Mendoza possible. Mendoza said, the transfer portal nowadays, it's like speed dating, and there's a couple of other blue bloods in the mix. The move came with real money attached to it too. This was the era where major transfers get compensated like free agents. His transfer from Cal to Indiana reportedly included a $2 million NIL package. That's the first time serious money entered his life. Months before an NFL contract was ever on the table, and it's worth remembering that number as the baseline for everything that followed. What happened next at Indiana is one of the more unlikely runs in recent college football history. Mendoza's impact was immediate, as he led Indiana to a perfect 16-0 season in 2025, culminating in a national title win over Miami, starting all 16 games for Indiana, while leading the FBS with 41 passing touchdowns, a 182.9 passing efficiency rating, and 288 points responsible for. He didn't just have a good year statistically. He had a historically strange one. Mendoza made history as the only FBS quarterback since at least 1996 to post multiple games with at least 90% completion against Power 4 opponents. And he also became the only quarterback to have 6 games with at least 4 touchdown passes and no interceptions. His head coach, Curt Cignetti, has talked about him in terms that go beyond stat lines. I cannot say enough about the job that he has done in terms of dedicating himself, to the process of improvement. Cignetti said about Mendoza, he has come such a long way since we got him from Cal, but I still think that he has barely scratched the surface of his potential. I think that much of him, and then came the Heisman. Mendoza ultimately went on to become Indiana's first ever Heisman Trophy winner, and the first player from the Big Ten to win it since 2006 when Troy Smith won it at Ohio State. A program that had basically no modern football pedigree suddenly had the most decorated player in the country. Here's where the NIL money angle turns interesting though, because it wasn't small by the time he was finishing college. Reports going into that title run pegged him as one of the highest valued players in the sport. According to industry valuations from around that time, Mendoza's NIL portfolio was valued at roughly $2.6 million, making him one of the top 5 highest valued college football players of the season. That ranking put him in specific company, ranked 5th in college football and 7th in the On3 NIL 100, with only Arch Manning of Texas, Jeremiah Smith of Ohio State, Carson Beck of Miami, and Bryce Underwood of Michigan valued above him. And that number had climbed fast. His valuation went from roughly $1.6 million earlier in the year to $2.6 million after his undefeated season with the Hoosiers. He also picked up real corporate partners along the way, not just school-based deals. The Indiana quarterback signed a name, image, and likeness deal with Adidas, joining a small handful of the sport's biggest college names on that same roster. So by the time the Raiders wrote him a $57 million check, Mendoza had already spent 2 straight years. As one of the highest earning amateur athletes in the country, the strip avoidance, the grinder mentality, the refusal to change his routine, none of that started the day he got drafted. It's the same posture he held through an entire college career where the money kept climbing and he kept treating it the exact same way. But to really understand why he holds that line so hard, you have to go back further than football altogether, to his family, and to the reason discipline became his whole identity in the first place. Everything about how Mendoza carries himself traces back to one person, his mother, Elsa. Elsa Mendoza was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis long before her son ever became a household name. According to a December 2025 letter she wrote for the Players Tribune, Elsa revealed that she was diagnosed about 18 years ago. However, she and her husband decided not to share the news with their sons until years later. She explained the reasoning to Fernando directly in that letter. "You and Alberto were so young and I was doing fine." Elsa wrote to Fernando, "And mostly I didn't want you to worry. It just felt like this impossible thing to place on two young boys." Before the illness became public knowledge, Elsa had been an athlete herself. Fernando's mum is also the mother to Alberto and Max Mendoza, and she previously played tennis at the University of Miami. That competitive background is part of why she describes her relationship with her oldest son the way she does. In the same letter, she wrote about the early years of raising him, describing a period when she became pregnant with him at age 25 after moving from Miami to Boston following graduate school. "It was exciting, but it was scary. And your dad had to work a lot, which meant that for a while it was mostly just you and me." She wrote, adding, "We'd watch TV, we'd play music, we'd buy groceries, we'd go to the park." She called herself his very first teammate and called him a gentle giant. That framing mother as first teammate is exactly what came pouring out the night everything came together for him. When Indiana beat Miami for the title, cameras caught Elsa in her wheelchair on the sideline, and Elsa, who uses a wheelchair, was a central figure in his emotional post-game celebration. Weeks earlier, accepting the Heisman, Fernando had already dedicated the trophy to her directly. "Mami, this is your trophy as much as it is mine," Fernando said in his acceptance speech, fighting back tears. "You've always been my biggest fan, you're my light, you're my why, you're my biggest supporter." He kept going, tying her illness directly to the mentality that built his career. "You taught me that toughness doesn't need to be loud, it can be quiet and strong," Fernando continued. "It's choosing hope. It's believing in yourself when the world doesn't give you much reason to. Together, you and I are rewriting what people think is possible. I love you." That's not campaign trail sentiment. A doctor who specializes in the disease explained just how serious what Elsa lives with actually is. "It is a chronic condition where the immune system mistakenly attacks the brain or the spinal cord," said Dr. Luis Compress Bruegel. "Assuming there's some type of inflammation in the optic nerve, that person can have vision loss or blurry vision. There's no cure for it. There is currently no cure for multiple sclerosis, though treatments are available to slow disease progression and manage symptoms. Nearly 1 million adults in the United States are living with it." Fernando didn't just talk about it. He and his brother Alberto turned it into an actual campaign. Fernando and his younger brother Alberto, who also plays football at IU, teamed up to raise money for the National MS Society in support of their mum, partnering with 2 restaurants in Bloomington, Indiana to launch separate menu items, with proceeds going directly to the National MS Society. By early this year, that specific push had raised nearly $150,000 in donations, and it kept climbing after that. A broader fundraiser under the family's name eventually raised more than $220,000 toward their goal of $250,000 for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. He put his own name and platform behind it too, going public with a message that was less about football and entirely about his mother. "My mum means the world to me. She's the most caring and positive person I know, and I'll keep doing everything I can to support her and others living with MS," Fernando wrote via the fundraiser's website. Even his corporate partnerships got redirected toward the cause before he ever accepted the Heisman. He arranged for Adidas to give 4 families dealing with MS $10,000 each to spend on gear, turning a personal endorsement deal into something that reached total strangers going through what his own family had lived with for 2 decades. There's a doctor's perspective in all this too, worth noting because it reframes what people see when they picture MS. Another specialist who spoke about the family's story pointed out something important about how the disease actually presents. "I think the important thing to understand is that there's no one look of multiple sclerosis," she said. "Some people will use a wheelchair, some people will look just fine, and you won't realize the challenges they're facing. Elsa's story, told loudly through her son's platform, gave a very public face to a disease that mostly stays invisible. And there's a detail hiding in plain sight that connects directly back to why he treats a casino strip like a threat. His father isn't some background figure either. Fernando Mendoza's father, also named Fernando, is the chief of pediatrics and medical director of pediatric emergency at Baptist Hospital and Homestead Hospital in the Miami area. A pediatric ER doctor and a mother managing a chronic illness raised a son who grew up watching what real, unglamorous endurance looks like, day after day, with no highlight reel. That's the actual source of the grinder system he keeps talking about. It didn't come from a playbook, it came from a house in Miami where discipline wasn't optional. That's the full picture behind the guy standing in a Las Vegas practice facility, turning down blackjack tables. Now the only question left is what all of it adds up to, going forward with $57 million already in the bank, and a starting job still very much up for grabs. Camp is where all of this gets tested in real time, and Mendoza is not walking into a situation where the job is handed to him. Kirk Cousins is expected to open the season as the starter, with head coach Clint Kubiak preferring a veteran presence. While Mendoza settles in behind the scenes, Cousins isn't some retread keeping the seat warm either. He's already shown he can throw elbows for it, literally having recently gotten into a practice field fight with Max Crosby. That's the environment. The $57 million man walked into a locker room where the presumed starter is scrapping with his own pass rusher, just to establish who runs the building. Mendoza's own path into camp has been deliberately slow-cooked. He ran the third-team offense in organized team activities and minicamp, but is expected to take on a larger role in training camp. That's an unusual place for a #1 overall pick to sit in the spring, third string, but it lines up perfectly with everything he's said about not deviating from a process. No entitlement, no rushing the depth chart, just waiting his turn while the front office lets Cousins hold the wheel. The broader stakes for the franchise make the patience easier to understand too. This isn't a team that's won much lately. The Raiders have been to the postseason just once since 2017 and haven't won a postseason game since the 2002 season. That losing stretch is exactly why the front office was willing to spend a $20 million guarantee on a 30-something veteran quarterback, just to buy Mendoza time rather than throwing a rookie into the fire immediately the way plenty of desperate franchises do. There's a symbolic piece to all of this too, even beyond the numbers. Mendoza wasn't the only quarterback from his Heisman class trying to find a foothold in the league this offseason. Diego Pavia, the runner-up to him in the voting, went through a completely different path. Diego Pavia, formerly of Vanderbilt and second to Mendoza in the Heisman Trophy voting, was waived by the Ravens late Thursday, nearly 3 months after the team brought the quarterback to rookie camp for a tryout and then signed him as an undrafted free agent. One Heisman finalist landed a guaranteed $57 million. The other got cut loose as a camp arm a few months later. That gap says everything about how thin the margin is between generational prospect and just another guy, even among players who were separated by a handful of Heisman votes. It's also worth remembering exactly how rare Mendoza's specific accomplishment actually is in NFL history. Following Cam Newton in 2011 and Joe Burrow in 2020, Mendoza is just the third quarterback in the Super Bowl era to win the Heisman and a national title prior to being taken #1 overall in the ensuing NFL draft, per NFL research. Newton won a league MVP, Burrow won a Super Bowl. That's not pressure Mendoza put on himself. That's pressure built into the historical company he now keeps whether he asks for it or not. The team's own framing of the pick leans hard into that same idea, that this wasn't just adding a talented arm, it was making a bet on a specific kind of person, bringing a winning pedigree and coming off a 2025 season, in which he threw an FBS-leading 41 touchdowns. Mendoza has officially signed on to turn around the Raiders. That's the language of an organization that needed more than stats. After Jamarcus Russell, after nearly 2 lost decades, after a coaching change and a quarterback room in flux, the Raiders needed someone who wouldn't be undone by exactly the kind of environment Las Vegas offers a newly rich 22-year-old, and so far by his own account and by everyone around him describing the same pattern. That's precisely the bet that's paying off before he's even started a regular season snap. The money is real, the strip is 3 miles away, lit up every night, doing exactly what it's designed to do, to people who suddenly have more cash than sense. Mendoza walks past all of it to eat at the same handful of restaurants and get back to the facility, whether he's starting games by October or still watching from the sideline. While Cousins runs the offense, the discipline that got him here hasn't moved an inch since the check cleared. And for a franchise that's been waiting almost 20 years for a reason to believe again, that might end up mattering a lot more than the $57 million ever will.